Hi, and welcome back to the Azure Database for MySQL monthly webinar. I'm Shreya R, a product manager with the Azure Database for MySQL team. We are live today on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitch. And for those of you who missed any of our previous episodes, you can check out the recordings on our YouTube channel. Our handle is at AzureDB MySQL. Today's episode is going to be all about migrations, things to keep in mind as you migrate from external sources, be it on premises, on VMs, or other clouds to Azure Database for MySQL. So here's the agenda for today's episode. We'll have two deep dives, just like last month's webinar. First, James Wren, Software Engineer 2 at Microsoft, will walk us through using the new MySQL discovery and assessment feature in Azure Migrate, which was recently released in private preview. How to discover the MySQL servers in your environment, assess whether they are ready to migrate to Azure Database for MySQL, and obtain SKU cost recommendations, etc. Next, RK Iyer, Senior Cloud Solution Architect, will walk you through everything you need to know to migrate your workloads from Amazon RDS MySQL to Azure Database for MySQL. And finally, as always, I'll share with you the latest feature releases and our upcoming roadmap. And as always, requesting you all to keep the session as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions or feedback, or you just want to drop a hi and let us know what you want to hear from us in this session or in the upcoming sessions, please drop it in the live chat window and we will address them as we go through the session. We also have our product expert, Sudesh Narayan Swami, on the chat window to help answer any questions about the product that we are unable to address during the session. All right, now let's get started with the very first section. The first phase of any migrations, be it infra, apps, or DBs, is the planning, discovery, and assessment phase, right? Azure Migrate is an Azure service that provides a single centralized hub to discover, assess, and migrate on-premises infra, such as servers, database, and web apps, to Azure PaaS and IaaS targets. The new MySQL discovery and assessment feature in Azure Migrate, which was recently released in private preview, now allows you to discover MySQL servers in your environment, assess whether they're ready to move to Azure MySQL, and obtain compute, storage, SKU, and cost recommendations. I'd like to invite Bingyan Ren, Software Engineer 2, to walk us through the new feature with the demo. Hi, James. Welcome to the webinar, and thank you
Hi,
for joining
Shreya.
us today. Could you please share a brief introduction about yourself before we jump into the presentation?
Sure. I'm James, a software engineer at Microsoft working for MySQL team. And I guess today I'll introduce you the project about MySQL discovery and assessment.
Over to you, James. Thank you.
Okay, so let's start. MySQL discovery and assessment in Azure Migrate consists of three big parts: discovery, assessment, and business proposal. For discovery, there are two subsections, shallow and deep, in which shallow discovery means that we would discover all the servers running in your environment, and we will obtain a software inventory with their attributes. Once we collect this list, we will then move on to deep discovery, during which we will connect to each one of the instance and run some queries to collect the config and performance data. We will later use this throughout the assessment service. Assessment has two goals: readiness checks and SKU recommendations. For every MySQL instance we discovered, we will try to apply a bunch of preset rules to see if the MySQL instance is suitable to our cloud environment or not. If the answer is yes, then we will try our best to give you the best SKU recommendation. Depending on the workload and the performance data we collected previously, we will tell you what storage and compute SKU you should be using. Along with that, we will provide you with the cost. However, if the instance is not suitable to our cloud platform, we would also tell you the exact rationales. You would see a list of warnings or issues of why we think the server is not ready to be migrated yet. And after the assessment, we will also give you a business proposal. Basically, you will be able to see the year-to-year cash flow analysis of migrating to our platform. And you will also be able to visualize a bunch of charts explaining all the difference of having your instance on-prem versus in our cloud platform. The last part The business proposal is not ready yet, so you won't be able to see it during private preview. But the discovery and assessment are completed, and feel free to try them and write to us if you have any questions. With that being said, I think we can move on to the demo and see what the customer experience would look like if you choose to use the service. Okay, so the demo was pre-recorded to help save us time. While running the process yourself, you may find it taking a few minutes to install the appliance and to get the assessment report. And rest assured, because that is expected. To start using this service, one would first need to create a project under an Azure subscription and resource group. From the Azure portal, select Azure Migrate, Service Database and Web Apps, and on upper left, click Create Project. Here you would provide subscription, resource group, and information to create a new migration project. Since I have a project created already, let's jump into Discover process directly. This process enables customers to find their on-premise servers and applications. So here you will select the appropriate server types and follow the provided instruction in the page to generate project key, download and install the required appliances in the on-prem servers in order to kick off the discovery process. Once you have the required appliance installed, you will see a management page like this. Here you will need to provide some info about your machines. For example, IP address and username password. Once the validation passes, you would see the status column updated to discovery initiated. And then you can go back to your Azure portal to check the discovery result. In this project, we have 10 Discover servers, among which 8 of them have running databases. So let's click on the number 8. And you will see a detailed list of servers with MySQL instances running. And we can also see some information about the MySQL server itself. For example, MySQL version and number of databases. Once we have discovery finished, we can start triggering assessment. We can go back to the main page and click on Assess, select MySQL databases. Here we can modify the assessment settings and create assessment. Let's click on the database under assessment and wait for the status to be ready. Once the assessment status turns to ready, we can click on it to view the result. This page gives us an overview of how many SQL servers can be migrated and overall cost after the migration. Click on the link. We will be able to see a more detailed view of MySQL servers that are ready to be migrated versus servers that are not. For servers with migration issues or warning, you can click on the hyperlink and examine the exact reason why they cannot be migrated. In addition, we can also see information such as recommended SKU, recommended storage, and estimated cost. So that's the end of our demo. Try out the feature in private preview and let us know your feedback. Write to us if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, James, for the feature walkthrough. Folks, it's a super useful feature indeed, especially if you're planning migrations from on-premises environments. It helps you plan your migrations in a more systematic way, in a more efficient way as well. If you want to try this feature out in private preview, do write to us at askazurdb@service.microsoft.com, and we'll get you enrolled right away. Thanks again, James, for taking the time out to be with us so late in your day and for sharing your expertise. Thank you again.
Thank you, Shreya.
Perfect. Moving on to the second topic of the day. If you've been following our latest announcements and benchmark studies, you may have read the study about how Azure MySQL Business Critical SKU with the accelerated logs feature enabled is up to 50% faster and 54% cheaper than MySQL on Amazon RDS. If you are looking to migrate from AWS RDS MySQL to Azure MySQL with minimal downtime, then this session is for you. Inviting RK Iyer, Senior Cloud Solution Architect, to walk us through all we need to know about migrating from AWS RDS to Azure DB for MySQL. Welcome, RK. Thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Hey, hi Shreya. Thanks for having me here. I am RK Iyer. I work as a cloud solution architect. I help customers build data and AI solutions on Azure. Today, I'm going to talk about AWS to Azure migration. So, typically, if you look at migrating from one cloud to another, it could be a complex endeavor and it could be time consuming as well. So, today we are going to talk about the different migration approaches, the different migration strategy, as well as the best practices for migrating from AWS to Azure.
Over to you, RK.
Yeah, thank you. So, before we start off with the migration, it's important to consider the different migration considerations. And these are the set of migration considerations which we need to consider before the migration. The first and the most important is the downtime. So typically the business operation team, they understand the criticality of the application as well as the corresponding databases. And they play a pivotal role in identifying the acceptable downtime, which could be in hours or it could also be near zero downtime. And that's where once we identify the downtime requirement, then we can plan for the migration approach. The next critical aspect to consider is the version incompatibility. So again, for Azure Database for MySQL, we support two versions. We support 5.7 and 8.0. Again, here, whenever we migrate from AWS RDS MySQL to Azure MySQL Flexible Server, we would encourage to have a two-pronged approach, wherein if you are migrating from 5.7, even though you want to migrate to version 8, the first step should be to migrate to the same version, which is 5.7, and then you can have in place upgrade to migrate to the latest version. The next and the most critical aspect is network and security. So again, when we talk about network and security, it's about connectivity between AWS to Azure. And again, there are multiple ways of establishing the connectivity from AWS to Azure. So we can have public internet with restricted IPs. We can also have VPN connectivity between AWS to Azure if you need security. And then we can also have cloud exchanges wherein we can take advantage of performance and security by using the direct connect as well as the express route. So again, these are the different methods of connectivity between AWS to Azure. And second is the security. So when we talk about security, it's important to understand what's the security requirement in terms of network security, the authentication mechanism, the authorization mechanism. So once we consider the security, then we can plan for the security in Azure. Now looking at the next consideration, which is performance. So again, when we talk about performance, it's the performance expectation from the application and the corresponding database. So again, with respect to performance, we need to understand what's the SLA expectation, what's the peak load. So these are some of the factors which needs to be considered before we plan for the migration. This also helps us in determining the SKU which needs to be considered in Azure MySQL database. Again, there are multiple ways to identify the performance in Azure. So we can make use of the metrics in the lower environment. So we would highly recommend to do a migration in the lower environment, consider the performance, consider the peak load SLAs, and take advantage of the metrics to make sure that the performance SLAs are met. The next important consideration which needs to be taken into account is the cost. So again, when we talk about cost, there are multiple tools available which you can leverage to take advantage of the cost. So again, we have Azure pricing calculator, which can be used to identify the price or estimate the price. And then we can also make use of RI benefits, which gives you a considerable advantage in terms of costing. Then the last, but again, one of the key requirement is to identify and understand the business continuity requirement. So again, with respect to business continuity, it's important to understand what's the RTO and RPO for the application. Again, with respect to availability, there are multiple availabilities which are available in Azure in terms of we have same zone redundancy as well as multi-zone redundancy which are available. So you can take advantage of that and make sure that the business continuity requirement is fulfilled. So these are the set of considerations which we need to take into account before we migrate from AWS to Azure. So now let's look at the different migration approaches. So again, if you look at the migration approaches, we have two categories of migration. So we have offline as well as online. So within offline, we have MySQL dump, which is the most popular tool for backing up the MySQL database. The user can take a backup and then they can export the data as well as schema back to the target server. This is typically recommended whenever you want to migrate and the database size is less than 1 TB. Typically, it's if it is in GBs. The next tool is MyDumper and MyLoader. So again, the advantage which MyDumper and MyLoader gives you is the parallelism. So it gives you the better performance. And again, one more thing is the schema as well as data, they go together. So you don't need to consider, the schema as well as the data part being separate. The next is the Azure Managed DMS, which is the first party service. So you can perform the offline migration using the Azure DMS. Again, one of the advantages of using the DMS is that since it's a PaaS service, you don't need to provision the resources, right? As in case of MySQL dump as well as MyDumper, MyLoader, we need to provision a VM. We need to take a backup and need to have a VM wherein we would be doing the load. So with DMS, you don't need to take care of that, and that's self-managed. And then we also have MySQL import, wherein you can have, so this, I don't want to steal the thunder from Shreya, so he's going to talk about it, but you can make use of MySQL import for importing the Percona backup into the Azure database for flexible MySQL. Next, we also have the online migrations. With respect to online migration, we have Azure DMS, wherein you can perform the online migration. And then we also have MyDumper and MyLoader with data and replication. So again, you can use MyDumper and MyLoader for the initial seed into the target database, and then you can use the data in replication for getting the delta into the target database. So these are set of tools which can be used for migrating from AWS to Azure. So now let's look at some of the phases which are there as a part of migration. So we have 5 phases, and we can divide the entire migration into 5 different phases, starting from planning. So this is where we have the discovery and assessment. And James talked about the importance of discovery and assessment and how you can make use of the tool to understand what's there in AWS, assess, and do the planning. Again, another key thing which needs to be considered is to take care of the fallback plan. So again, no matter how much careful planning we do, there could be scenarios wherein we need to have a fallback plan. So I have seen customers also maintaining a backward compatibility, which means that they also have the data restored back in AWS for a week's time just to look at the stability, and then if there are any cases, they can still go back. The next is preparation. So in preparation, we have the connectivity from AWS to Azure, wherein we would take care of network connectivity, make sure that both of these databases can connect with each other, and also the infra provisioning. That's where we provision the target SKUs in Azure. Again, the third most important aspect which we need to consider is to have a dry run. So when we talk about dry run, it's to make sure that it meets the performance SLA which is defined, and we do a dry run so that we identify the migration, we identify and make sure that the migration is performed within the downtime which is provided. The next is the actual migration. Once we are confident about performing the dry run, then we do the final migration wherein we migrate and monitor. So once we are confident and we do the sanity testing, post the migration is where we make sure that we do the validation and the cutover. So these are the 5 phases wherein we can divide our migration and do the migration from AWS to Azure. Next, let's quickly look at the demo for migrating from RDS to Azure MySQL. So we have pre-recorded the demo so that it's easy to save on time. So here we have the AWS database, and we have a T3 micro server. We get the endpoint of the AWS server, and then we use it to connect to AWS. So again, when we connect, we need to make sure that we have the connectivity, and also we would check what's there in terms of the number of tables which we have, the views, the stored procedures. So let's quickly look at the count of some of the tables which we have. We can also see the list of tables. So here we have the 8 tables which we need to migrate. We also have the views as well as the stored procedure. So this is the AWS environment. The next step is to provision Azure Flexible Server, MySQL Flexible Server, which we provision in Azure. So we provision it, we provide the server name. It's important. So we had the AWS server in East US. So we would select the same region, which is East US. And again, we would have the same version which we had in AWS, which is 5.7. Then we could connect using, we provide the username and password. And then we also don't have any firewall restrictions since this is for demo. And you can see that we have the deployment, which is in progress. So till now, we have looked at the AWS environment and we have provisioned the server in Azure environment. Let's quickly go to the server and check the location, again the version, and it's deployed in AZ2. So once the Azure environment is provisioned, we would create an Azure migration service. So again, this is where we would create an Azure database migration service. So we select the source server type, which is MySQL. The target is Azure Database for MySQL. We provide the subscription, the resource group, as well as the migration service name. Again, it's recommended to have the migration service deployed in the same region as the source and target. We select the SKU. Since it's an online migration, we recommend to use the premium SKU. We would also need to provide the virtual network name. So this is how you create a data migration service. And you can see the service is getting deployed. So we have the service and we also have the VNet which gets deployed. Let's quickly go and check. So as you can see here, we have the service deployed with premium SKU. And now let's quickly create a migration project. So we need to specify whether it's an online or offline. So here in this case, we are doing an online migration. So we specify the online data migration. Next, we specify the source details, wherein we specify the source URL, the port, the username and password, which we use to connect to the source. Next, we provide the target details. So here we select the subscription, we select the location. Again, this is East US. We select the resource group, and then we select the flexible server name. And then we also provide the target password and username. So once we have provided the details for source and target, the next step is to select whether you want to migrate the entire server or you want to select specific user accounts, views, triggers, or you want to migrate the routines. And then you also provide the database which you need to migrate. So as you can see here, we have the Contoso database, and we have also the list of tables which we need to migrate. So we select that. And once we have selected the tables as well as the database which we need to migrate, we just verify the details and we create an activity by specifying the activity name. And then we start the migration. So once we start the migration, it is, as you can see here, it has two parts. The first is the initial load, wherein the initial load gets transferred into the target. And as you can see here, we have the 8 tables which we need to migrate. And we also have the data changes tab, wherein you can see the delta. And as you can see here, this would be the delta which would be migrated. So as you can see here, we have loaded the initial set of tables, and then it also specifies the delta data, the number of inserts, updates, and delete. So once we can see that both the source and target are synced, then we can stop all the incoming transactions to source database, and we can perform the cutover. So you can see that currently the cutover is in progress. And once the cutover is 100%, which means that we have done the cutover. Again, some of the things which needs to be taken care is that after performing the cutover, we need to make sure that we redirect the application to the newly migrated target. We perform the sanity testing. And then once we are confident, we need to do the validation. And also, in some cases, if we have changed the server parameters, it is advised to revert the server parameters. So here we are now checking in Azure. So we are connecting to the database in Azure, and here you can see the Contoso DB, which is migrated to Azure. And you can also see the list of tables which have got migrated. And you can also see the views which got migrated. So again, based on experience, some of the best practices which needs to be considered is that you can, for faster load, you can also change some of the parameters, server parameters. For example, you can switch off the slow query log, or you can have the query store capture mode to none. So, and you can also scale up the target storage tier. So these are some of the best practices which can be employed to make sure that the migration is faster. And again, once the migration is complete, you can revert these server parameters. So as you can see, we have successfully migrated our MySQL database from AWS to Azure. So that's what I wanted to cover here, wherein how you can migrate and plan the AWS to Azure migration. Thank you, Shreya. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, RK, for the insightful tips and tricks and the demo. I love how it's just a few clicks in Azure DMS, and we've done the migration online. Folks, do check out RK's blog for a detailed write-up of not just the tips and tricks, but also the tutorial in to use DMS. Thank you again, RK, for your time with us today. And just like James, thanks for joining us despite it being so late in your day. Thank you.
Thanks, Shreya.
Perfect. Let's move on to the final topic of the day, Azure Database for MySQL, latest features and roadmap. In the past month, there were two major feature releases. First, the MySQL discovery and assessment in Azure Migrate. Just like James Wren covered in the today's session, with this functionality, you can use Azure Migrate service to discover MySQL servers in your environment, assess them by identifying their compatibility to move to Azure Database for MySQL, and receive compute and storage queue recommendations along with their costs. For more to try the feature out and for more details as well, write to us at askazuredb for MySQL at service.microsoft.com. It's currently in private preview, so we are targeting to go public preview by the end of June. So we'd love for your feedback in the meantime. The second one is the MySQL import CLI for external migrations. It is now in public preview. Like RK mentioned earlier today, this tooling is a single CLI command which will allow you to achieve simple and fast migrations of your heavy workloads greater than 1 terabyte from external sources to Azure Database for MySQL. It's so fast that you can actually migrate 1 TB of data in around 23 minutes. Azure MySQL import will actually use your physical backup copy obtained through Percona Extra Backup, which is stored in Azure Blob Storage, to provision and restore to MySQL Flexible Server. The feature is now in public preview and will be GA in the upcoming month or two. Go to aka.ms MySQL import external to learn more. And finally, leaving you with the upcoming roadmap, long-term retention of backups, which is currently in private preview. Previously, the service allowed for automated backups and on-demand backups to be retained up to 35 days, right? Now, with long-term retention, you can now retain the backups up to 10 years, further aiding your audit and compliance needs. This will be released in public preview by the end of this month or early next month and will be GA next quarter. On-demand backup and export in private preview. This provides an ability to export at moment physical backup of the server to your Azure storage account, that is Azure Blob Storage, using an Azure CLI command. Once exported, these backups can be used for data recovery, for migrations, for redundancy, availability, auditing, and other purposes. This will be released in public preview by the end of the month too, or early next month, and will be GA'd next quarter. Next, support for 32 TB storage, currently in private preview. The ability is to expand your storage for business critical SKU to up to 32 TB. It will go GA in the upcoming quarter as well. Error logs and server logs. This feature provides you the option to view and download error logs under server logs option for up to 7 days to analyze and troubleshoot issues by yourself. Currently in public preview and will be GA'd in a month or two's time. Support for Azure Database for MySQL in Microsoft Defender for Cloud will be in public preview in the next month or so and a subsequent GA within the next quarter. The next 3 features are currently in public preview. Flexible maintenance options, which will allow you to reschedule maintenance windows and even instantly initiate maintenance with a reschedule now option, will be GA'd in the next quarter. Near zero downtime maintenance for HA-enabled servers. This feature is designed to reduce maintenance downtime for HA-enabled servers, ensuring that in most cases, maintenance downtime is between just 40 to 60 seconds. This is again pivotal for critical businesses that cannot compromise on HA and require minimal interruption in their database operations. This will also be GA'd in the upcoming quarter. And finally, accelerated logs for business critical SKU, with which you can see up to 2x performance enhancements at no additional cost. As called out earlier today, with this feature, we also see a significant performance and price performance enhancement over AWS RDS, Aurora, and Google Cloud SQL for MySQL. The feature will be GA in early Q3 of CY24. But meanwhile, in the last month, we've had several updates to this preview feature to overcome some of the limitations that were present earlier. First, previously limited to servers created after November 14th, this feature is now accessible for all existing business critical tiers standalone servers. Second, it supports Entra ID or Azure AD authentication. Third, it supports major version upgrade. And fourth, it has been extended to include 3 new regions: Japan East, Korea Central, and Poland Central. Check out aka.ms FSMy What's New for more details. It's our What's New page for Azure Database for MySQL Flexible Server. And if any of you want to try out the features in private preview, do write to us at AskAzureDB for MySQL at service.microsoft.com. One last update before we close out. The MySQL team is presenting at the Microsoft Fabric conference this month. Register today. Come join us at the event and attend our 2 sessions. The first one is run your mission critical workloads faster and more cost effectively on Azure Database for MySQL, presented by Sai Kondapalli and Shiv Iyer. You've definitely seen these 2 speakers in our webinars earlier. This session is on the 27th March on Wednesday, is the early morning session at 8 a.m. The second one is empowering real-time business solutions with Power Platform and Azure Database for MySQL integration. I'll be presenting this session on March 26th in the afternoon. To learn more about it, you can go to aka.ms Fabric conference. Register today and we'll see you there. We will also be at a community launch on Wednesday at 11 a.m. So looking forward to seeing you all there. Folks, that's all for today. As always, we'll close out with 4 things. First, check out our contributor initiative. Start contributing today and get recognized with badges, official recognition, and more. aka.ms MySQL contributors. Second, to learn more about our service, you can use these resources or feel free to reach out to us on our email ID. Third, stay tuned for more updates and announcements by following us on social media and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Our handle on YouTube as well as Twitter is at AzureDB MySQL. And finally, if you want to feature in our upcoming webinars or collaborate with us on any collateral, fill out this form and let us know. Also, you can use the same form for any feedback on the session or if you have any requests or suggestions for the topics we should be covering in the upcoming sessions. Thank you all for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the episode. See you all in our next session next month on the 10th of April at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time. Thank you.